Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Hello and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Tracy Cram-Perkins and our show today is Dementia Home Care. I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, USA Global TV and Radio, and Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. I am a 4-time dementia caregiving survivor and the author of Dementia Home Care, How to Prepare Before, During, and After, which is now available on audio. And joining me today is Dr. Ramona Leibnitz, PhD immunologist, who will be discussing the history and reasons for vaccines. Welcome, Dr. Leibnitz.
Thank you very much, Tracy. It's wonderful to be here.
So just to start out, you and I do know each other personally, and I may flip and call you Ramy. So I just want to let the audience know that we do know each other.
And that's absolutely fine. So thank you very much.
So I have a question for you. Can you please share with the audience about a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I am a PhD immunologist. That means I'm coming from a research background. I spent many long days and nights in the laboratory. I got my PhD at UT Southwestern Medical Center at Dallas, and then was invited to be a member at the Basel Institute of Immunology. That's in Basel, Switzerland, and that was just fantastic. Very interesting experience. Then I came back home and was a postdoctoral fellow at the National Cancer Institutes, which is one of the many institutes at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. It was there that I realized that I have a passion for communicating science. So I got into medical or science writing. I was a teacher of immunology, and then eventually got into working in my own company, developed it's called a clinical decision support system, which simply helps doctors make better decisions at the point of care. But most recently, and honestly, since COVID, my passion has been with vaccine advocacy. There's just so much that needs to be communicated about how important vaccines can be for public health. And so thank you again for inviting me on this show, Tracy.
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Leibniz. I mean, okay. Let me just say this. We have been talking about this for a while, and I'm very excited to ask you a few questions about this. One of the things we had talked about, and we just talked about this, was you were talking about the shingles vaccine. Can you tell a little bit about the shingles vaccine and how it might relate to brain health?
You know, that is just really interesting. There's been a study recently, I think it was published in December from Wales. They did a natural experiment, which was that people that had turned 80 and over were allowed to get the shingles vaccine. And this was a study published in December, so it's pretty recent. And those that were under 80 weren't allowed. So it was a very distinct cutoff, but it made for a very good set of cohorts to study. Again, a natural experiment. They weren't depriving people of the shingles vaccine. They were inviting people that were above 80 to get this. And then they looked at the incidence of dementia. And when you have people that are living in the same country and basically the same age, you can make some assessments as to whether the shingles vaccine actually has an effect on downstream sequela, which is brain health, as you indicated, Tracy. And they found that indeed dementia was decreased in people that had gotten the shingles vaccine. And they studied this for a while. I can't remember exactly how long their follow-up was. It was just fascinating because shingles does have a neurologic component. There's neurological inflammation that occurs. And obviously, inflammation in the brain is not good. It's not healthy and can lead to dementia. So this is an indication that, once again, get a vaccine and protect your health.
Okay, was it a specific type of shingles vaccine or is it any shingles vaccine? Do you know?
That's a good question. I'll have to look more specifically at it. I just sort of glanced at it
Okay.
just because it was important for dementia care. The one that's available right now in the United States that I would, strongly urge everyone to get is the Shingrix, which is very effective. It was designed and developed for older adults. So this is something that works extremely well with an older immune system, which is not always the case. Most people um, are correct in thinking that vaccines are a childhood thing, but and children will mount a very effective immune response because they have young developing immunological systems. But it doesn't mean that our immune systems fail us as we get older. They just require slightly different priming and signals to mount an effective immune response.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So I'm going to take us back in time a little bit. I want to talk to you about the 1918 flu epidemic.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yes, I know that's it's we're going way back in the time machine here. And the reason I'm asking this question is because as we have developed vaccines and are using vaccines, there's some good information out there. There's not such good information out there. There's just a lot of noise. And one of the things is we don't consider how bad these epidemics were. Can you talk a little bit about the flu pandemic and what came out of it?
Well, thank you for even asking about this because when I was going through grad school, we didn't really get a lot of history of science. And so it was only when I was a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institutes of Health, I did a internship in the Office of Communications. And there was a guy there that was very interested in history of science. And I started looking into it. The 1918 flu epidemic is something that we're now becoming more aware of because we've all just lived through a pandemic. But I hadn't really heard about it. It wasn't really on people's radars, and it should be because it is mislabeled. A lot of people know it as the Spanish flu, which is a misnomer, and I can explain why in a few minutes. But more than that, it's not an epidemic. It was pandemic. It crossed international borders. It was worldwide. So let's start there. Flu can be deadly. It was very deadly in 1918. This is war years. It's at the tail end of World War I. And suddenly people were getting sick. This was interesting too, because it was not just young people or old people, ones with the more weakened immune systems, but it hit 20 to 40-year-olds, which of course were soldiers at that time. It's called Spanish flu because during the war years, uh, the media didn't want to um, depress morale. And so they sequestered this news that people were getting sick and dying all over the place. And the only place that was neutral and still had free press was in Spain. So they were reporting on these illnesses and the effect that it was having on society. And because everyone learned that Spanish people were coming down with the flu, it became termed the Spanish flu, when indeed it was affecting lots of people all over the place. India got affected very heavily. And indeed, it was devastating. Reports suggest, and it's hard to go back in time, but the estimate is that at least 50 million people died of flu during this 1918 pandemic. I don't want to say epidemic, pandemic. So it was really substantial. It was just devastating. So don't think that COVID was the only pandemic the world has had. This is in our nearish history too, something that the world went through. And put that in perspective too, because now we can look back and again, there's a lot of uncertainty, but COVID apparently was caused the death of upwards of 7 to 20 people. The flu pandemic of 1918 again caused 50, and they even say up to 100 million deaths. So it was devastating.
Wow. I mean, that's just that number is kind of overwhelming considering what we just came through. I know that in my own family, my grandfather had contracted the flu when he was 13 during the
Oh,
pandemic
really?
and nearly died from it. So I'm just grateful that he survived, or I wouldn't be here today. Let's just face it. So, okay, I want to ask about a couple other different types of vaccines. Uh, there was a history of polio in this country in the earlier part of the 1900s also, or mid 1900s. Can you talk about what polio is and how it spread and the vaccine got developed?
This was interesting because one thing I forgot to talk about when we were discussing the 1918 flu pandemic is that this is before antibiotics. So people not only died of flu, but then they would get secondary infections, and a lot of people died of pneumonia and things like that. There wasn't a way to treat it. In 1908, viruses were recognized, and then science progressed and we actually discovered antibiotics, which really got into widespread use in more in the World War II era, which was 1940s. But the polio virus began spreading. In particular, it emerged in New York City, I think, in 1916. So we didn't have a real good understanding of of viruses at that point, and didn't have a lot of ways to treat it at all. So this surged in New York City in the summer and then kept coming back, and it spread across the country, and people were getting polio. In fact, the kids were getting polio, and it's a paralytic disease. So they were becoming paralyzed, and nothing will activate a society more than when the kids are in danger. I mean, let's face it, it's horrible to see your child get sick and then either die or be paralyzed for life. As it emerged, these became known as the polio summers, and people became very scared. They didn't understand how it was spread, and in fact, it took a while to realize that it was a oral fecal transmission. They used to publish the victims' names in the newspaper, and it was associated with, they thought it was uncleanliness or had to do with pests. They just weren't sure what it was. So of course there was a stigma if you got polio in your family, and there's just a lot of fear. I remember my own mother was we lived here in Seattle, and her mother sent her down to live with her grandparents here on Fox Island in southern Puget Sound, just to get her away from the communal swimming pools, from crowded areas, because obviously it was infectious and was passing from people to people. So the neat thing about polio, and it's grim, but what really happened was there was an unprecedented um, uh, what do I say, just societal response. So, first of all, there became a huge push by FDR, who also suffered from polio, to get some funding to begin to address this problem through research and fund the research to make this possible. And so the March of Dimes was initiated. And we're talking about people putting dimes in envelopes and sending them to the national government just to work on treating this disease and understanding this disease more. So that was pretty amazing. And then there was this huge Mothers March. The mothers got involved, and they would go door to door at specific times. They'd say, leave your porch light on, and we'll come by and collect money for this endeavor. And that was huge. And that was uh, quite a unifying endeavor. People wanted a cure. They wanted to figure out how to prevent their kids from getting ill. The development of the iron lung was quite a scientific advancement, because when it paralyzes the lung muscles, you can't breathe. And this artificial lung, the iron lung, could breathe for them and help them get through the disease enough so that they could regain either health or an ability to breathe on their own, and they might still be paralyzed, but you're talking survival. So the funding with all these dimes and all these women collecting money was put towards, in particular, two very brilliant scientific minds, Albert Sabin and Jonas Salk. And there's sort of a race for the cure. Who's going to invent vaccines first that will help prevent polio? And ultimately, that's a great story. And there's some neat shows on the history of polio. I encourage you to take a look at those, because it's just fascinating to see how everyone came together and were working to help the kids survive this era of infectious disease. Ultimately, the Salk vaccine got approved, and there was a massive rollout to test it. 1.8 million kids were tested, and it was found to be a resounding success. Everybody got vaccinated. People were, dancing in the streets. There was a way to prevent polio, and it was just a wonderful thing. It wasn't just about discovering a polio vaccine. It was really about the funding machine that happened as society came together, and then again this huge rollout and trial and rollout of the vaccine. So it was big science, but more than that, big civic logistics that included parents and volunteers, women, and fundraising, and it was all done in concert to address this issue. So it's a neat story. It was fun. Thanks for asking about that.
Well, you just made me think of something else. Okay,
Okay.
so we just talked about polio, smallpox. Can you address smallpox?
I'm an immunologist, Tracy. I love to talk about smallpox. This is this is our biggest success story. I mean, yes, smallpox was where the vaccine story even began. Um, we've got uh, just Edward Jenner came up with a vaccine because he recognized that not all diseases are the same. And this is very, very important. It's sort of a crucial thing that people don't think about anymore. It wasn't that he saw disease and I'm going to cure it. It was that smallpox had a parallel disease that he noticed in milkmaids called cowpox. Smallpox was devastating. Smallpox has been in our society, in our world for thousands of years, literally. I mean, they found pox scars on Egyptian mummies. And it used to be such a thing that you could just assume that your family wasn't going to survive. There's going to be several children that died of smallpox. In fact, 1/3 of the world's population would would probably not survive as to adulthood. So smallpox was always around. It was a big scare. And it was interesting that milkmaids weren't dying like other people. They would get an illness, but then they'd survive. And they wouldn't get the pox all over their faces. These are blisters that would then scar. They would get it on their hands. And so you could tell if they were milkmaids and if they had this disease. So Edward Jenner realized that there might be some protective effect from cowpox. And he did this very famous experiment, which we couldn't do anymore, but it certainly was helpful back then. He, in 1798, he invited Sarah Nelms, a milkmaid who was suffering from cowpox, to meet with him, and he scraped a little bit of the pus from her pox, and he took a healthy young boy, what was his name, James Phibbs, and scratched it into his arm. So it was a way to get this pus into a healthy boy, and it was a huge thing, but people were willing to try because it was so devastating otherwise. So then they watched, and James Phibb got a little bit sick, then he got over it, which is fantastic. But that's not the end of the experiment. Of course, the experiment is to challenge James with smallpox. So Edward Jenner took some pus from somebody that actually had smallpox, that was very ill, and again scraped it into James Phibbs' arm, and he did not get sick. And people were just amazed. So that became a way to vaccinate people. Vaccinia comes from the Latin word cow or something like that. So that was the start of vaccinations. And it obviously developed from there. We have kept up increasingly purer ways of developing a material that causes a cross reaction so that the immune system recognizes smallpox, even though it had started with a different disease, cowpox. And the important thing is that the world is now rid of smallpox. We do not have smallpox in our world. So tremendous success.
Okay, so that leads me to some other topics here. Okay, so we've got vaccines that have now are showing some sort of progress. We also have vaccines that are showing help against the HPV virus. Is that correct?
Ah, yes. Oh, great question. The human papillomavirus is ubiquitous. It's kind of like Epstein-Barr virus. I think everybody has it, especially, well, everyone who's sexually active. It is a sexually transmitted disease, but honestly, as we become adults, we are sexual beings, and I think upwards of 90% of American adults in particular have been exposed to HPV. I spoke a little bit about how kids have a better immune response because they're younger, they respond better, they're healthier. So this idea that we should vaccinate our kids for a sexually transmitted disease makes sense because vaccines are preventative. You want to get the best immune response before they're challenged with disease. So HPV vaccine, the Gardasil 4, which protects against 4 different strains of HPV, and there's like 23 or something, but there's 2 in particular that cause disease. Let me go into that in a little bit, but the Gardasil 4 came out, I think, in 2006, and now we're up to Gardasil 9, which protects against 9 different HPV strains, but 2 of them in particular are known to cause cancer. And this is big too. You think about vaccines treating illnesses, but the Gardasil vaccine against HPV can actually prevent cancers. And there's a huge correlation. In particular, early on, it was found out that HPV can lead to cervical cancer. So if you can vaccinate against human papillomavirus, you can prevent cervical cancer. And that's why originally back in 2006, the Gardasil vaccine was given to girls first, and prepubescent girls before they were exposed to HPV. But now we've done more research. We're more aware that HPV virus is also associated with 6 different cancers. And those cancers aren't just female cancers. They are cervical cancer, penile cancer, cancer of the anus, the vulva, the vagina, and more importantly, there's oropharyngeal cancer, that is throat cancer, which affects both boys and girls, males and females. The whole idea is that HPV, we're all exposed to it. Most of us clear it, but in some people it becomes latent and persistent. And it's that persistent, undetectable disease that can then, even decades later, generate abnormal cells, which can turn into cancer. So you're not protecting your child from any immediate illness or cancer when they're young, that you as a parent can protect your child from cancer that they might develop when they're 30 or 40 or 50. And if you can protect your child with a vaccine now, wouldn't you do it? So this is a super important vaccine that both boys and girls should get. And they are now, it used to be that they're recommending it at age 11 and 12. And now there's a big push for HPV at 9, because they find that the immune response that 9-year-olds generate is slightly higher than at 11 and 12. So again, better bang for your buck if you can vaccinate early.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So, okay, off topic for just a moment.
Sure.
The evidence shows that Gardasil is protecting against several different types of cancer. Is it too much of a leap to think that at some point there are going to be other cancers that can be protected against from vaccines?
I think we're discovering more and more that there's quite an interplay between these infectious organisms that humankind have lived with, throughout history, and how they can impact our bodies. Viruses are parasites on our cells. They inject their information into our cells and take over the cell's inner machinery to create more viral particles. That's how they reproduce and replicate. It stands to reason that some of the genetic information is going to be integrated in some of our cells. It's been shown that has happened frequently. It's not always a bad thing either. It can be a good thing. We can acquire different functions and things that help our bodies. But if it disrupts it in a way that turns off the stop machinery, I mean, all cancer is cells that just grow in a way that can't be stopped. So cellular division that doesn't have a stop mechanism is what cancer is. And if that occurs because of viral integration with our DNA, that causes cancer. And I know that we'll discover more, and hopefully we can prevent more of the cancers. So prevention is so much easier than treatment.
Oh, you just took away my next question.
Ah, okay.
That's okay. So I want to go back now to what do vaccines actually do? Because you're talking about all the immunization that we give our children, starting in their infancy, literally, and going up through, to adulthood almost. Uh, can you
Yeah.
talk about what they do and how they work?
Vaccines are preventative. And I just want to put that out there in a one-liner. If you can remember anything else, vaccines prevent disease. How do they work? They are providing, they're priming the immune response to respond to an infectious disease. But vaccines themselves are not the disease. They're not infectious and they're not dangerous. They're a vehicle to provide inactivated or the husk or the proteins of infectious diseases in a way that the immune system can both recognize, mount a response to, and generate a memory response. And that's really important. Those are the three things that vaccines do. They activate the immune system, they generate a response, and then they help the immune system generate a memory response. Because what's really important is that the immune system um, beat the infectious diseases in a time scale. It's always a race. You get coughed on, you're going to get a cold, you feel sick, but then your immune system ramps up, overcomes that infectious disease pathogen, and you get better again. There are some diseases where the immune system is not going to ramp up as quickly, and you get sicker and sicker, and sometimes the body doesn't win that race. So the way to improve the odds of winning that race is to prime that immune system with a vaccine so that a memory response is developed. That means the second time the immune system sees that infectious disease, it can mount a much quicker and a stronger response. And therefore, you may get sick, but you're not probably going to die. It's kind of like wearing a seatbelt in a car. It's not going to prevent an accident, but it's certainly going to save your life if you're in a severe accident. So that's
Uh,
that's that's basically what vaccines do. Again, it's preventative.
okay, I want to address a couple of things that you hear that may or may not be true. Um,
Mhm.
that I just got a vaccine and I got sick. Obviously, the vaccine did not work. Is that true, or what is going on behind the scenes? Because I hear that all the time.
I hear that particularly with flu vaccine. I think it's important to recognize that we get the flu vaccine during flu season. And so that correlation means that you're in the time of getting flu, and you may have just picked up the flu right before you got the flu vaccine. So it may have nothing at all to do with the flu vaccine. Um, the other aspect is that uh, there are reactions to vaccines. Like I say, it primes the immune system, so it is trying to activate the immune system. And some of the discomfort that you feel when you get sick is not just the pathogen, but it's your body's response to defending you against that pathogen. It it is dis-ease. It's causing unease. It's causing you to feel sick, but it's actually very healthy. Your body is working. Your immune system is working. Um, the the idea that a vaccine is causing the disease that you've been vaccinated against, in particular with the flu. The flu vaccine simply cannot cause um, the disease itself, because the flu vaccine is, like I said, it's an inactivated or it's a otherwise crippled form of the disease. So there have been cases in history where there have been inadequate preparations of vaccines. So I'm not going to say that vaccines are perfect. I mean, they're made by humans. Humans make mistakes. And biological things happen where there can be a reactivation of a vaccine. But I really want to put this in perspective. The risk of anything coming from a vaccine is so much lower than any of the ramifications of getting a bad disease. So if you get flu, you can get really sick. You can get pneumonia. You can die, as we saw in the 1918 flu pandemic. It can be a very serious disease. The, the majority of people, when they get the flu vaccine, are going to feel soreness. They may spike a fever. They may feel bad for a couple days. But if you're putting that in perspective, instead of saying, "Oh, I feel horrible. It's the vaccine's fault," you can think, "Ah, I am healthy. I'm going to survive this. This is not the end story here." And I think a lot of people forget that vaccines are preventing something a lot worse. You don't get mad at that seatbelt because you're strapped in. You just do it nowadays. This is just something we accept that we do when we get in our cars. It's preventative. It protects us. You're very happy when you get in that accident and you're not thrown from the car. That's what vaccines do, is they prevent something much worse from happening.
So we have less than 3 minutes left to go.
Ooh,
So I
okay.
mean, we talked a lot here. So I want to you perked up something that made me think of this. Okay, you were talking about how when somebody gets a vaccine that they feel icky. Um, is there a point which we should wait until the vaccine's gone through our body before we start taking a Tylenol or an aspirin or something like that? Will that reduce the efficacy of that vaccine, or is that false?
That is false. You're allowed to take anything that makes you feel better because, and here's another thing that I think people aren't aren't quite aware of. The immune system is incredibly complicated. There are layers and layers of feedback and regulatory loops, many different players within the immune system. We've heard of antibodies, we've heard of T cells, maybe. There's all these cytokines and checkpoint inhibitors within the cells and regulatory cells. So there's a lot going on. By taking something that reduces our pain and it reduces some of the inflammation, that's not that's that's not hurting the actual immune response. That's just making you feel better. So don't feel bad if you want to take a Tylenol, just so that you can feel better after a shot.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so where can people go to find accurate information about vaccines?
Great question, because like you said before, there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of opinions out there. And not all of them are going to be educated opinions. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I'd really encourage everyone to get more information, like from trusted organizations, WebMD, Healthline, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic. In particular, look at the Academy or American Academy of Pediatrics. They have amazing stuff. I did give you some links, Tracy, that I'd love to share, where you can get more information about vaccines, how they're generated, what you can expect, how they work, answers to frequent questions. What I would caution you is any individual, even if they have an MD or PhD after their name, individuals may not represent their colleagues' viewpoints. They can be providing their viewpoint, which is fine. But oftentimes they're going to say things like, "I'm the one you should believe because I have a MD in surgery," or something. That's very different from immunology. It's really a specialty. So go with organizations that you can trust.
Raimi, thank you. We are out of time, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you. This was great. Love to talk about this stuff. Just
Oh,
fascinating stuff.
It is so cool. Well, I apologize. We are having to sign out now. So we will be back on April 21st with guest Robert Felgar, CEO of Raz Mobility, to learn more about dementia-friendly cell phones on the next episode of the Dementia Home Care Show. In the meantime, you can go over to our YouTube channel on USA Global TV and Radio or Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck and look for the Dementia Home Care playlist, where you'll find all of our past episodes. Thank you to the wonderful Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck for all of her hard work behind the scenes today, and thank you to our sponsors for making this possible. See you next time, everyone.
USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents Tracy Cram-Perkins, a dementia caregiving survivor teaching how to balance care with peace of mind. #1 resource for dementia caregivers. It's the book Dementia Home Care: How to Prepare Before, During, and After. Over 17,000 copies sold of this must-have guide. And now a testimonial from Tracy Smith.
If I was to describe this book to someone who is going through a similar situation, I would underscore how important it is to have some sort of a tool or a guidebook to help you through certain stages. And there's so many, it's such an unknown topic to the average person. And to have this as a reference is essential. It's going to help you get through it personally, as well as help your loved one manage.
To learn more, go to TracyCramPerkins.com. Tracy Cram-Perkins is an award-winning author. She's also the host of Dementia Home Care television show. Watch it here on USA Global TV and Radio.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.